Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sarah Finnegan, and I am an associate partner in the UK. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Andrea is not wrong. You are strapped in for the best panel of the day. But I guess if anyone knows me in this room, you will know that I am living multiple childhood dreams right now, all at once. As an avid Red Devils fan, I watched countless hours of the 90s legends, imagining kicking the ball to Roy Keane and knocking it to the back of the net. And then over the last few years, most recently, following the explosive rise of women's sport all across the world, including at club level globally, and then also following the World Cup all across the world. So needless to say, as an early stage tech investor, you don't often get the opportunity to share the stage with absolute sporting icons. And as you can tell, I am very, very, very excited. So let me introduce you to our panelists. Before you guys come up on stage, I'd love to just run through a little bit of a bio on each, many of whom do not need an introduction at all. But Jill Ellis, a renowned football executive and coach, most famous for leading the US women's national team to back-to-back FIFA World Cup titles in 2015 and 2019, and becoming the only coach in history to do so. She now serves as the Chief Football Officer at FIFA, so really shaping the global strategy of the game at the very highest level. Next up, Saul, an absolute England legend, one of the greatest defenders of all time, with over 500 Premier League appearances and 73 for England. He now brings his experience into coaching and leadership. Next up, we have Anders Lindegaard, two-time Premier League winner with Manchester United and former international goalkeeper, who successfully transitioned into banking at UBS. And finally, but not least, Dr. David Spindler, who is a leading sports scientist and performance coach with 25 years of experience helping elite athletes like Mark Cavendish really unlock mental performance, which has led to Tour de France stage wins, World Cup championships, and Olympic medals. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to hear from these incredible individuals who've each performed at the very, very highest level. And we'll explore things like what it takes to build a successful team, the qualities and characteristics of high-performing teams, and how to stay at the top. So I'm going to get out of the way, and we're going to show a video to see some of these individuals in action. Please welcome to the stage Jill Ellis, David Spindler, Saul Campbell, and Anders Lindegaard. A very warm welcome, guys. Are you comfortable?
Very comfortable.
Thank you. Yes.
Sitting with my starting lineup right here, I'm feeling pretty good about myself.
Excellent. All right. Would love to kick off the discussion with you, Jill. You're the first coach in women's World Cup history to win back-to-back World Cup titles, and just the second ever to accomplish that feat in FIFA history. Arguably one of the most difficult things that you could ever do, given the 4-year cycle and the pressure of the target on your back. What mindset shifts did you make between 2019 and 2015 and 2019 to avoid complacency? And how do you maintain hunger when you're already at the top?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think the reality of success is actually not the best teacher. You win a game 4-0 and you kind of move on, and you lose a game and you dig into the why. But you know, after 2015, it's really about sort of resetting and refocusing your team to go on this journey again. And sustaining success certainly is challenging. But I remember the first meeting after 2015 that the team got back together, and the very first thing I put up on the visual for the players was the quote, "Even if you're on the right track, if you sit there, you'll get run over," right? And it's this message to the players. And when you work with elites, and I characterize elites as people that want to be better tomorrow than they are today, if you go in there and you say, "Oh, this is great, we'll just keep this thing moving," you're not going to get their attention. With elites, you have to kind of throw down the challenge. And basically I said to them, "Ladies, where we are today is not going to be good enough for us to win, to repeat." And I put up a visual of a mountaintop, right? And I said to them, "It's brilliant. You guys are world champions. You've been to the summit. But there's a reason why summits are small and the air is thin, because nobody's supposed to go up there and hang out for a couple of weeks, right? It's to climb, get up, enjoy the view, and then climb again." And so it was really about resetting them and making sure that we had a culture that demanded from them every day. And our mantra was one day better. Can we be better tomorrow than we are today? And when you have that, because the reality of competition, you're either doing one or two things. You're either closing a gap if you're behind, or if you're ahead, you're creating separation. And sometimes, if you're already the best and you're the world champions, you're now kind of create separation of a better version of yourself. And so how do you do that? How do you go about sort of setting that standard in terms of challenging the players every day? And, it was something that our staff really, adopted, but the players bought into it. We kept it competitive. We obviously, between the cycle, we refreshed with players, brought in certain things. And what we did is in 2016, we committed to win in 2019 by building a team that we felt that could have answers for any opponent we faced.
Very interesting. Thanks, Jill. Saul, I'd love to bring you in.
Hello.
You were part of Arsenal's legendary Invincibles. 49 games unbeaten, a record that still stands today. That kind of sustained excellence requires an almost superhuman belief that you simply won't lose. How do you cultivate that level of mental invincibility, and how do you maintain it when you're 30 games in?
I think the first thing is you've got to get a good bunch of guys together first. Guys or football players who love the sport. And I'm not saying they do anything to win, but they're excellent in their positions. They look after themselves. They believe in themselves. They believe in the team, the right manager, the right scenarios around them. Obviously, not too many dramas, but if you've got good people, there's always dramas, and you can handle that. There's always ups and downs, but also the excellent kind of quality players who want to keep on improving, want to win. Doesn't matter if they've won 5-0 before, they'll go again, they want to train properly, they don't miss kind of training days. If they really kind of put their mind to it, they just want to keep on playing, they love the game. And then I think you need a little bit of luck on the way, but I think you work hard, I think you become luckier. But at the end of the day, sometimes those I'm being honest, those records, they almost pick you. I know people have come close to the games, but 49 games without, losing, it's just incredible. It's just mind-boggling. I was just looking at the stats, how it all came about, and you do need that luck, but you do need that quality. But I think a year before, I think we went on to about 30 games. So Arsene Wenger was saying, we can do this. We just want to win. We want to win the Premiership. And if we get this kind of record, we beat 2 records. We obviously beat a record that stood for over 100 years. But then with the 49, we beat Nottingham Forest had a record of 42 games back in the days, but that spanned 2 seasons. And we broke that. We didn't break the British record, and I think that's held by Celtic. And I think they got 62 games without losing. So we're doing, that time was a special time. But you need these special players in the right time, everything has to, stars align. People can, God, the whole lot, everything's mixed in there, But it's mind-boggling. And then on top of that, I didn't realise, had a record, still got a record, came close. Rodri, Manchester City came close. It came 49 games without losing, but I went 56 games without losing a game. So I hold that record, Premiership record, for at least 20 years, but I only kind of discovered that only 10 years ago, because no one tells you about these records.
Brilliant. Anders, I'd love to bring you in. You had an interesting career trajectory. So Norway's goalkeeper of the year to competing with David De Gea for a #1 spot at Man U. That's a big leap. In terms of pressure and expectation. Most goalkeepers would be intimidated stepping into that type of an environment, but you thrived. You did really, really well. You went on to win 2 Premier League titles. But my question is, what separates players who shrink under that magnitude of pressure versus those that actually perform better?
Yeah, that was a very big change. I came from a small community in Norway, in the city of Ålesund. I think 35,000 people live in there, and when the stadium was full, it was 10,000 people, and watching on TV was maybe 50,000 if we were lucky. And then going to Manchester United, which at the time was potentially the biggest sports global brand in the world. And it wasn't just that, it was also my childhood dream. So I grew up being a Manchester United fan. I watched Manchester United on the couch with my dad as a kid. I watched Ryan Giggs, Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, Edwin van der Sar, etc. on TV. And it's a big change to suddenly find yourself sitting next to them in the locker room from one day to another, because it is a big leap, and I'm probably one of the last players who made a leap of that magnitude. And I think for you to succeed in that, I think there's 2 key elements to it. First of all, you gotta really trust your instincts and your education, or your upbringing as an athlete, and trust the fact that you're there for a reason. You're not just there by chance. You're there because you validated yourself. That's the one part which I think is key. The other part, which I think is key for such a thing to be successful, is that the culture you're joining really needs to help you along the way. I think at that time in Manchester United, there was a culture for good players coming to become great players coming to become world class, whereas today it's probably more the opposite, right? And that's a cultural problem they have. And stepping into it, there was a real culture for me to go in and succeed, even though I found myself with some of the best football players in the world, having 2 weeks before that, having played at a completely much lower level in the Norwegian league. So I think those 2 components is really important. And yeah, maybe especially the culture thing of the place where you end up, that there's a real culture to perform. That is super, super important.
Very cool. Thank you, Anders. David, let's go back to the science. You spent 25 years studying high-performance minds, and you work with exceptional athletes who pursue goals that seem almost impossible. Mark Cavendish, a great example, chasing stage wins in his 40s with athletes that were half his age. Most people would have given up a long time ago, but true outliers seem to have a different relationship with impossible. So from a brain chemistry and neuroscience perspective, what happens there? Can you kind of dive into it and help us understand it a little bit more?
From Sir Mark Cavendish's perspective, he's been told he wasn't good enough since he was a really young individual, and he had a internal dialogue that was the opposite of what other people were telling him. So his innate ability to be able to remove the external and internalise his own thoughts, he knew he was good enough, and from that perspective, went for his goals regardless of what anyone else was actually thinking. And luckily enough, well, luck actually has nothing to do with it, talented enough to be able to deliver world-class performances on a stage where everyone was looking. So what the question was, I think, was what's the difference? The difference is passion, it's motivation, it's drive. And what that drive is what wakes people up in the morning and what they actually think about first when it comes to, when there's world-class sport, it's actually their job. So there's no difference really between athletes getting up and wanting to deliver a performance, whether that be on training or actually delivery of on performance day, to going to work in the morning. It's just a slightly different pitch. From my perspective, at least anyway, the brain chemistry is exactly the same.
Yeah, and just on the Mark Cavendish example, can you give specific examples for how you kind of unlocked, maybe blocked path, let's just say?
Well, let's just say he didn't like me at the start. He's quite a cagey character. He really disliked Australians. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I have an accent that's definitely Australian. So how I unlocked it, I actually didn't talk to him at all. I spoke to every single one of his peers within a team, and then he came to me because he wanted to know what everyone else was talking about. And I captured his attention by actually not giving him the attention, because he was the person within that team frame that was the biggest there. And then from that, he was having a really tough time mentally, and I allowed him to be vulnerable, actually. And allowed him to sort of speak openly and be very candid with myself. And all of those conversations have been kept to ourselves. It's really important when someone is vulnerable to keep to yourself, from what I do for a living. And then from that built trust. And that trust became something that even when we weren't working together within a team environment, he then brought me on as from an individual athlete perspective, because he trusted me. And that trust is unbelievably important when it comes to any relationship, because once you get that trust, you become greater than the sum of its parts, and which is pretty much what high performance is.
Excellent, thanks David. Jill, building excellence, you've got a track record in it. You've got 106 wins with the US women's national team head coach, more than any coach in team history. You've clearly built something sustainable beyond just talent. You had to manage things like generational transitions, integrating new players and egos, while maintaining veteran leadership and creating a culture that really could perform under intense pressure. So what do you see as the key ingredients for sustaining that consistent momentum and high performance, both on and off the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I think and you touched upon it. I mean, so much of it is, it's people. You're managing people, right? And you're leading people. And our jobs as leaders is to maximize the potential of those around us. That's ultimately our job. And so when you go into that environment, you certainly want to have a culture that sustains that and props that up. But, one of the things that I found in managing, players is, or any organization really, people need two things, I think, to really be comfortable in the environment, to build the trust. They need to know that what they do matters. They need to feel valued, regardless of what their role is, whether they're the 25th player on your roster or they're the star. Is what they do accountable? Does it matter? And they also have to have clarity. Like, nobody operates well in the grey area, right? So if I understand what's my role, what's my expectation, what's being asked of me, if you as a leader can kind of create both of those things for people, then I think you have a chance to have an environment where people are coming every day to feel valued. For example, in 2014 when we started, I mean, I had a roster that was probably one of the best, the players on there could have played for almost any team in the world. So how do you go into a World Cup environment where some of the players don't get to play a minute? And how do they feel a part, and how do you build that synergy with the team? And so we sat there, this was 2014, and I was sitting there, and the night before a game, you put up your lineup, you put up your starters, and then you put up your reserves, substitutes, whatever the moniker is you call them. And I sat there with my staff and I said, you know what, if we actually think about the substitute, they're actually coming in to have an impact. They're not filling in. So how do we show value to these players? So we actually changed the name, this is a long time ago and you hear it a lot now, to Game Changer. So we had our starters and then our game changers. And then every time I was asked before the World Cup, it was like, how are you going to win, how are you going to win? I would always say our depth will help us win. Whenever we did a review meeting, instead of showing images of the players on the pitch actually scoring goals, I'd show the bench celebrating those moments. Because the more you can build this synergy between everybody on an environment, then you get a sense that everybody's going to work for the whole. The other thing I think that's really critical is you let your introverts be introverts, you let your extroverts be extroverts. You hear it a lot now, let people be authentic. If people can live as natural to who they are, then they're also going to be able to be, I think, to participate and celebrate and join in. So I think a lot of it was making sure that the environment set the demand in terms of our one day better, that practices were challenging. And I think the other part of it is making sure that these players knew, regardless of what they did, it was going to help us be successful.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jill. I mentioned strong personalities a few moments ago. So you captained England and were a leader in that Arsenal team alongside massive personalities like Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira. Championship teams are often filled with alphas who all want to be the star. I don't think anyone's thinking of anyone in particular at the moment. But how did you navigate being a leader among leaders? And can you share a specific moment where you had to manage egos on and off the pitch?
I think the main thing is you got to accept there are egos. There are some guys who want to be at the top. Some want to be in the back area. You know, there may be 4 or 5 guys who want to be captain. All that kind of scenarios are going on. But I think the main thing is be authentic to everyone around you, on the pitch, off the pitch. You know, if you're going for dinner with some of the lads or whatever, on the coach, everywhere. And then I think in the end, people know, the players know who you are. And that's the thing, because once you get that authenticity out there with everybody, you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to shout. You just do. And then at the right times, you say the right things at the right times. And then on the pitch, you do the right things. You're there every single second. You're there training. And you just build that kind of scenario. So in the end, there could be 4 or 5 guys who want to be captain, who got egos, and you can live with that. You've got to have enough guys who are comfortable. I'm comfortable with another 4 or 5 guys who want to be captain, egos. You know, everyone's got their time, because sometimes those egos shrink within the game, within a season, half a season, whatever. Something could be happening behind the scenes. But as long as you're there and you're being authentic, I think that's the one. And then the manager picks who wants to be captain or whatever, or the vice captain, and you follow. It's quite easy with the men. You just follow, and you just fall into place. But as long as it's not a left field person coming in, I think then everyone accepts it. And I think once you're comfortable with that, that's the main thing. You know, you can't win on your own. It's impossible. So you need 4 or 5 captains on the pitch anyway. You just got to understand when to step in, when to step back.
Very cool. Anders, you won 2 Premier League titles under Sir Alex Ferguson, one of the most successful team cultures in sport history. As a goalkeeper, you had a unique vantage point, though, to observe really how Ferguson built and maintained that winning culture across different personalities. What did you learn about creating things like accountability and excellence from that legendary environment?
Yeah, I think that Ferguson was as successful as he was, or I know that he was as successful as he was, because he was primarily just a great leader. He really had an ability to make Manchester United, which was a global sports brand, arguably the biggest on the planet, feel like it was one big family. It felt much more normal to be inside of Manchester United than it does if I kind of try to look into it from now. It was he built a ship. He was a captain on it. He set a very clear direction on it, and he made everyone pull the same direction. And back to what you said, Jill, in terms of managing all these egos, I think that was very true. That people need clarity. So he was very honest with people. And then people need to have a sense of purpose as well. He was extremely good at doing those 2 things. So yeah, a fantastic leader that really also understood how to get the best out of people. He knew on an individual basis what kind of person needed a clap on the shoulder and what kind of person needed a kick in the bum. So yeah, fantastic people skills. That's what made that whole era so successful.
And Jill actually touched upon it, but how did he handle players who weren't necessarily getting a regular game, but were kind of crucial to the squad's success? Do you have any specific examples there?
Yeah, he was honest with them. I remember one team talk. He said that Michael Carrick came into my office and he said, "Boss, I want to play. You're not playing me." And what he did then, he told players what games they were playing, like 10, 15 games out in the future. So they knew what they had to prepare for. And yeah, I think that the honesty he gave them was, on the back of that, then you have to make your personal judgment on whether you want to be a part of that or if that's not good enough for you. If that's not good enough for you, I think a really good example is Dimitri Berbatov, who was there, fantastic striker, funny guy, he never said a thing in a locker room, and today we had this WhatsApp group that's been mentioned a few times in the media, and he's the most talkative guy I've ever come across all of a sudden. But anyway, Dimitri Berbatov, he wasn't happy with the games that he got, and the boss was very honest with him, and Dimitri, he made the decision to leave Manchester United because he wanted more. But I think what is also quite fascinating is that all the players that left Sir Alex Ferguson, I don't think I've ever seen anyone talk bad about him. In Dimitri's example, he said, "I love Manchester United, I love Sir Alex Ferguson, it's the best time of my life, but I want more. I want to play every single game, I want to be the main man." And if you're honest with your players or your employees, then they have a valid foundation to make a decision on. So, yeah.
Sometimes you have to watch out for the boot flying.
Did everyone hear that in the room?
Sometimes you have to watch out for the boot.
Brilliant. David, what a perfect segue. You work extensively on mental resilience and athlete optimization. When you're brought in to work with, say, a cycling team or an athletic program, how do you create a systematic approach to things like mental performance that works across different personality types and athletes? Can things like resilience actually be taught and scaled across a team, or is it fundamentally individual?
I don't think it's fundamentally individual, but it's definitely individual, and it can be scaled and it can be learned. What resilience is from a psychological concept is your ability to absorb stress and then manage that stress and then move forward from that stress. So in everyday life, that cortisol, which is the hormone that's really cool at the moment on Instagram, that actually is stress. So how you teach that is actually go in and have really candid and valid conversations about how individuals deal with stress, if they've had it before, and from an individual standpoint, allow that person to be able to be vulnerable to you again, from my perspective at least anyway, and that's different if I went into a cycling team or a football squad or something like that, which I've done before. But it needs to be an individual case scenario, and then how you actually scale that is create a report on the individual and the individual itself, and then say this is how many individuals that deal really well with stress, and then and give them different brain training on how to create a little bit more resilience, and then how they deal with that. Some people deal with stress differently. Everyone, like these guys, would have seen some people really buckle under stress, but also some people who sort of knuckled down and just were better under stress than what they would be if they had none at all.
And I think it's a mixture as well.
Yeah, totally. And then
You're good at stress, and then 2 years later something else happened, and you can buckle.
Yep.
You're human beings.
yeah, exactly. So from an overall perspective, it's actually finding out where they are in their life, and where that stress is coming from is actually super important from a teen's perspective, at least anyway. If you understand where they're getting their stress from, you can actually deal with that stress really well, or at least give them the support network to be able to then deal with that stress. But fundamentally, is it individual? Yes. It's an overall allostatic load, which is the amount of stress that you have overall. And then from a team's perspective is how that stress obviously interacts and permeates across the group. And if that permeates across the group as a positive, then you actually leave that. But stress can be a positive and a negative thing. It's how you deal with that's the big one.
And do you have any specific examples of frameworks that you've developed for any individuals like Mark Cavendish or anyone else that really, I guess, help them along the way?
Well, again, giving a Mark Cavendish example, he was getting a lot of negative feedback from the press about him being washed up and being finished and his career was over. And he wasn't enjoying his sport. He wasn't enjoying himself as an individual as a result of that. So one of the big things that we did was actually find some fun. And I was speaking to Anders about that prior to the conference. And having fun, just in general, is really big. And people forget to do that. And you're doing this because you should enjoy it. And if you're not, the questions that should be asked is why not? And what is making that happen? That's what's happened in either your life or every day or whatever it is that's made it not fun anymore. Figure that out and then try to change that. And so the framework is, am I having fun? Yes, no. And what do I need to do to change that?
And it's, we had this conversation before and I said that I think the question I've had most through my active career as a football player is from young kids who wants to be football players, and they always say, "Oh, well, what kind of advice can you give me to become a professional football player?" And the answer I always gave them, or give them still to this day, is make sure you go and have fun. Because if you go and have fun, then you're gonna perform on 100%. As soon as you're not having fun anymore, then your effectiveness drops to 90 or 80, and then you're going to get taken over by all the others. So I really resound that having fun is so important, not in all aspects of life, right?
Yeah, true. But the actual chemistry of that's dopamine and serotonin, a little bit of norepinephrine. There is really good research into joy itself and actually enjoyment overall. You don't have to have a lot of that enjoyment all of the time, but it really needs to be specific to what you do. Yeah, at least you need to have some, at least.
Enjoy,
anyway.
or is that banter enjoy?
If it's banter, that's fine by me too. But that's. I've just come through Athletic Bilbao, actually, a football team. I've done their neuroscience program, and that banter was very Basque, and I didn't get any of it. But
Basque banter and fun frameworks. Brilliant. We are rapidly running out of time, and I would love to squeeze in a few more questions. I would love to jump to the final part of the discussion, which is drawing parallels between sport and entrepreneurship. So, Jill, back to you. After conquering international football, you became the founding president of San Diego Wave. Any fans in the house? Essentially becoming a sports entrepreneur, building a franchise from scratch. The Wave quickly became one of the NWSL's most successful expansion teams. How did the skills of building a World Cup winning team translate to literally building a sports business?
Yeah, I actually have said to people, winning World Cups was cake compared to starting a business. Startup took some serious years of my life. I mean, there's so many overlapping principles, but maybe I'll share this quick story. So in May of 2019, the World Cup was in the summer. I had a team meeting and I was showing the players some clips of the game. And it used to be when I started that we would show clips of goals, you show highlights, you show clips. but teachable moments. And I would show a clip of a goal that we would concede. And when I started out as the coach, I mean, like, they literally physically couldn't look at the screen. They were like this, right? They were like, oh God, I don't want to see this. But over time, you build this trust and you build these relationships. And I knew in May of 2019, after this team meeting, I put up a clip of a goal we'd conceded. And I remember Alex Morgan, my forward, she said, if I'd have pressed there higher and quicker and gotten out there, that long ball wouldn't have been served. And then my midfielder put up her hand, Jill Ellis, and she said, if I'd read that earlier, I'd have picked up the second ball. And then here's where you know you've got a team. When my right back said to my right winger, hey, if you'd have done this and da-da-da, that ball wouldn't have been served, we wouldn't have given up the goal. And the forward says, yeah, you're right. And my point is that when you have accountability, where people can put up their hand and own the moment, and do it with trust and confidence. But more importantly, when you can actually call out another player or you can call someone out and it not be defensive, that's when you've got a team. And I think as a leader, when you build an organization, like, that's what you're trying to create, is an environment where people can layer in and trust each other to a point where you can have open and hard conversations, because the reality is it's those moments that actually make you better. It's the full of praise meetings where you're like, this is great, this is awesome, that's not actually making you better, but it's these moments where you can have these open, hard conversations. So fast forward, now I'm meeting with my new partnership team at the Wave. And I said to my partnership team, and obviously I'm like Googling terms like P&L, EBITDA, all the shit, right? So, but I'm learning. I mean, I've learned a ton about business, and actually we bought the team, my owner bought the team for $2 million, 3.5 years later he sold it for 115. So I mean, we did all right. So the reality was I'm sitting there on the partnership team, and I'm like, all right, guys, well, what do we think? We've looked at the market, we looked at what the front of kits for sale for. What do you think our number is this year, first year? They're like, it's going to be a stretch goal. I'm like, oof. And they're like, 4 million. I said, okay. All right. I said, well, listen, here's kind of where my brain goes. Nobody goes to the Olympics and goes, God, I hope I win a bronze medal. I said, so let's shoot for 5. Their faces were like, holy shit. There goes my bonus. There goes this. But what you know, and what you know in sport, and you know as a coach, is if you push, even if you don't achieve, what you learn in that uncomfortable space, that you learn that maybe you could. We ended up with 5.2 in the first year. But what it said to me is there are things that you can bring from sport into business and vice versa. The one thing that I think business can learn from sport is and these guys know this, in sport there exists a constant feedback loop. You go out and you play a game, you get feedback. Your coach is talking to you, watching video, you're getting feedback. And vice versa. I get feedback from the players and da-da-da. In business, it doesn't exist like this. It's more, people have a harder time with these very open conversations. So I give you an example. My head of marketing, she brings the launch video, she shows me the iPad, here's the launch video. Now, she didn't cut the video. She hired a company to do it. And I look at the video and I'm like looking at it and I go, yeah, I think it's good. I think there's some things here. And I look up, and you'd have thought I'd have smacked this lady upside the head because she was absolutely shocked that I wasn't saying to her, this is great, this is brilliant. And what I learned as a leader in the business world is we need to create environments where we can have these conversations where people are open to it and they can create suggestions and provide feedback, and we create a more natural feedback. So I have this philosophy with my team, with my groups. Nobody gets to be Switzerland. I now live there. Sorry if there's any Swiss here. The reality is, I want to hear your most passionate why, because when you go into the boardroom and you start a meeting, everybody in that room, as you're the leader, is waiting to see what you're going to say, because they either want to align with you or they're going to sit on the fence and really kind of talk out both sides, right? But the way you get better as a leader is if you hear the most passionate why, even if it's 180 degrees from you. So creating moments. So my staff now, when we come in, they know they can say, if it doesn't align with me 100%, it's okay. They can say it, we speak up, we talk about it, we have conversations. It makes my decisions more informed and richer. So I think those are the things where I think sport and business can really learn from each other, but it's very, very similar.
Very cool. Thanks, Jill. So you transitioned into football, into business yourself, essentially becoming an entrepreneur straight after your playing career. I think many in the room will know also that many athletes struggle with this transition because of, again, things that Jill mentioned, the immediate feedback loop and clear metrics of sport that just don't exist in business sometimes. How did you adapt?
Well, for me, it's quite hard because it's the trust element, it's quite easy to be on the football field and you're training with someone every day, you're playing, you're under pressure, all scenarios, and you learn to kind of trust in the really tough moments throughout the season. So that kind of validates it. It doesn't mean you're going to be talking and be friends forever, but it kind of validates it in a sporting sense. Coming into business, it's almost, someone says, yeah, let's do this, but they might think in the back of their head, well, I don't want to do it. That's the thing, the challenging thing for me, to actually understand if this person or these people are with me, and how do I create a situation that I can almost find out if they are trusting or they are into what we're doing, or, I'm building an AI business as well in sports. Are they with me, or are they just, on for the ride? So that is the most hardest thing for me to kind of take in, understand, and sometimes I say, do I go back to gut instinct? Do I feel this person's with me or whatever, or do I wait till something happens and it goes awry for me to wake up? Oh, okay, they're not with me. And both things have happened. I feel now I like the information, I like kind of understanding, I like challenging, because I think that's refreshing and that's key to kind of getting to the goal. But also maybe now I'm going a little bit on gut instinct as well to kind of go beyond the words, beyond the feelings. Like, are you with me? So I'm reducing that now, and it's getting better and better. Now I'm trusting myself as well and believing in myself. That's key, and finding people who believe what I'm trying to achieve as well. So it's getting close, but it's really hard.
But in this world of business, everybody's with you until you need to pay money, right? Everybody says yes to everything, and then when they have to pay the money, then not necessarily anyway.
Anders, you've also made the transition from professional football now at UBS. So two completely different things, and both demand peak performance under pressure. If you look at football, immediate public results every week, while finance sometimes requires a longer time frame. How have you adapted that competitive mindset of the instant feedback to the more patient, strategic thinking of the business that you're in right now?
I think leaving football behind is something many people struggle with. I think for me it was quite obvious. I didn't want to play football anymore in the end. I was torn apart, and mentally I was just full. And I hear a lot of ex-football players saying that they miss the locker room atmosphere and all that. But I was 38 in the end. I found myself in a locker room with 18 to 23-year-old that was talking about girls and cars and big dreams. I just had my second baby, and my contribution to the conversation was how little sleep I had last night. So I never really understood those players having a hard time leaving that atmosphere behind, because it's like missing college times and going out and getting drunk and all that. We're at a different place in life now, right? But yes, sure, it's a big change. I used to have, my office was a stadium in front of 80,000 people on a football pitch kicking a ball. And now today my office is an actual office. I have a desk, I have a computer, and I have colleagues in suits. So obviously it's a big change, but I think what I really, really enjoyed about football and sports was competing, the competition, which is also something that makes it more difficult when you grow older, because when you grow older you get slower and it's more difficult to win. It's simply just more difficult to win, and when you stop winning as much, even in training, as you were used to, it's not as fun as it used to be. But what I found really enjoyable about football was competing, and I can still do that in finance. I'm competing, in finance is a fierce competition for clients, for deals, for everything. And that part of it I really enjoy. I want to compete and I want to win, and I still get freaking frustrated, excuse my language, when I lose something or when something doesn't come through. And I think that is my fuel for my next chapter in life. And I'm still only, it's 2.5 years since I retired. I spent a year or 2 years at home with my babies and my wife, and that was all right, but it's also, but it's all right. But it's really, people walking at home with their small kids constantly, wow, that is tough. That is really hard, right? But you know, the competition of it, I really like, and it's what I want to say. It's still rather new for me. I'm still finding I characterize myself working within finance, but that is many things. So I'm hired in wealth management, but I'm also speaking to investment banking. I'm also speaking to asset management. I'm speaking to a lot of different people. I'm still finding my exact way and my real passion within this competition.
Very cool.
I think one thing for especially sports people is the mind is still fast, but the body isn't, and that's the real hard thing.
That is so frustrating. That is so frustrating. When you're playing football, that is horrible. That's a horrible realization.
Welcome to our world.
Yeah. That morning you wake up and you realize there's a younger guy, better looking guy than you.
Impossible.
Who is stealing your spot. That is brutal. Brutal.
What a note to end on. Thank you very much. Give it up for our panel.